So good afternoon, everyone. We have reached the final countdown for our Health Humanities event. My name is Andrea Charise. I'm a postdoctoral fellow here at the University of Iowa's Obermann Center for Advanced Studies. And along with the Obermann Center director, Teresa Mangum, it's really been my pleasure to organize this two-day working symposium on health humanities, building the future of research and teaching. This afternoon, we get to the session that in some ways I've almost been most looking forward to, our Keynote Roundtable on the topic of designing the future of health humanities. And for the benefit of those watching this video, I'm just going to take a moment to introduce our 6 really terrific keynotes who are going to be offering just a few closing thoughts and reflections on the last 2 days' discussion, as well as taking your questions. So starting at the far end, we have Susan Squier, Maura Spiegel, Willieme, Tess Jones, Erin Lamb, and Paul Crawford. And I'd like you just to join me in thanking them for a really incredible 2 days. Let's start that way. Okay, so earlier I asked each of our keynotes to think of a one-sentence answer to the question, what is the future of health humanities? And that's going to be the seed for our roundtable discussion today. But first, as a kind of primer for that, I thought you might be interested in seeing a kind of an overview, a selective overview of what you did at our agenda lunch today. And it'll be difficult for the keynotes, you'll have to turn around, I'm afraid. But again, for those of you that are watching on the video, we spent lunch today in small groups discussing what we saw as possible next steps towards creative new collaborations, both in research and teaching and public engagement in the health humanities. And we asked each of our tables to make a list of 3 best ideas or action steps for furthering cross-disciplinary research in this area. So this is just not what you're supposed to be looking at at this time. Pardon me. I will just see a moment. That's better. There. And this is just one action item taken from each of the tables. And I leave this up here because that too might generate some of your own feedback or discussion points that you may wish to bring up with the keynotes. One that I thought, well, each of these I thought was very interesting, the creation of an online network or mentoring network for graduate students in order to build research capacity, but also provide graduate students with a sense that they're not just the only ones doing this in their area, even if they may be the only one doing this kind of work at their institution. Another suggestion, finding structures and rewards that bring together and facilitate this kind of work across traditional disciplinary divides. The third point, developing opportunities to learn the skills one needs to teach in an interdisciplinary environment by making use of resources that are already on campus. Creating a graduate class with a health humanities focus by looking at a kind of cross-cutting theme. The one suggested here was, say, aging, that can really look at the values, methods, opportunities, challenges of health humanities by way of a common theme. And finally, I appreciated this, what shall we say, a kind of a promise that one of the small groups left us with, taking particular hands I've been exposed to and incorporating them into my pedagogy. And I thought that it was interesting to see how many of the tables were really focused on pedagogy, at the graduate level especially. And that may be something that is a spur to discussion. Okay. Oh, and Pat's suggestion has also reminded me, because we're filming, we've been asked to use a microphone, and I know it's anathema to many of you, but I am going to be running around handing the microphone off to you so that we can make sure that this is recorded. And keynotes, all I need is one of you to go like this, and we're done. So I know you had a long day, and you can make any signal you like.
Step, as James Joyce said.
I have been exposed to it. Sounds a little weird.
So perhaps one way we can start is with Humanities, one sentence, what is the future of health humanities? Susan, start us off.
I will do one. I don't need the mic, right? This will work? Well, I was really inspired by, I guess he's your vice president, Dan Reed, earlier, who suggested there are really only 3 issues worth caring about: matter and the universe, life and its processes, and what that means for the human condition. So with that in mind, I have one sentence. To get students and faculty in the humanities to understand that health is something that everyone should be concerned with, something that is affectively laden, global, spiritual, and ideological: the health of human beings, the health of other animals, and the health of the planet. Thank you, Dan Reed.
Maura, do you care to go next?
Sure. I just want to observe that both studies and experience show that healthcare providers and patients are not particularly satisfied currently with the healthcare environment as we know it. And I think, the future of health humanities is the world is calling out for this kind of work, for smarter, what are sometimes called consumers, and for more agile and patient-centered clinicians.
Great. So I thought of actually something a little shorter than a sentence, just 3 words. And what came to mind was broad. So really thinking about the field as stretching out in directions that were mentioned, such as including many more people in the university, as well as thinking about the issue of wellness also. And also experiential, so the ways in which we can engage. I think we talked a lot about hands-on and art projects and creative activities and the space they might have there. And finally, the word "and" is a word that I particularly like, and one where we can invite the softening of what is polarized.
Well, I'm actually, I'm going to echo some of what's already been said by Susan and certainly by Anna as well as Maura, because I began with, 2 words of expansiveness and inclusiveness. And I think that this conference has just reinforced my optimism around those 2 words, from even the cellular level of moving from medical to health humanities. We've actualized that change with this conference, to broader connections, undergraduate curricula, and development and implementation and health professions curricula and development and implementation, as well as perhaps a more mindful and creative way to think about how we use the arts. We subsume the arts into health humanities, but I think that actually being mindful about what the arts can bring to what we do is also part of that.
You've already heard my plea for the value of undergraduate health humanities moving forward. But coming at this point now down the line, this may not sound so new, but I can sloganize at least what we're talking about, which is I think health humanities is for everyone.
Excellent. 2 points. One is we hear a lot about compassion in healthcare, and some people are nauseated by that term. I think health humanities is a great opportunity for practical compassion for ourselves and practical compassion for those that we care for. So I'd like to see courses, trainings more geared to practical compassion, to showing roots for actually acting in the world through music, arts, and literature, and so on. And finally, it's a call to not just this university, but all universities to stop being anti-intellectual, in the way that they structure their knowledge formations between different camps, and these raise barriers to intellectual life, cross-fertilization of ideas, and will make the work of health humanities more difficult because of that. So it's a call to the larger structures, both governmental and in the way the universities have been aligned, to rule out the anti-intellectual past by looking at opening up how our great scholars can move between the different houses without being sequestered on artificial grounds.
Thanks to each of our keynotes. I think at the end of an event like this, where there is so much generation of goodwill and excitement, to have these kinds of seeding moments, and Erin, you spoke about sloganeering like it was a bad thing. I think we could probably do with a slogan or two, and I think the one that you've suggested is a very good place to start. And so thanks again to each of you just for that insight into these kinds of crystals that I hope will be prisms for all of us to sort of see through to the future of the health humanities. Again, I'm going to make my plea. Please indicate to me if you'd like to ask a question or make a comment. We do need the microphone, and so I'll run over and give it to you before you start asking your question. So I'll turn it over to our audience, and if we can get started on our the roundtable part of the event, that would be wonderful.
Can I ask a question of the audience?
Excellent, yes.
What is your best experience in this last 2 days? And keep it clean. What's your best experience in this last 2 days of this conference?
Well, I'll start. Oh, I forgot. Yeah, right. I'll just start by saying, that I so appreciated being turned into a student again. And I think often as, faculty members, we ask our students to do all these exercises and to talk to strangers, and we really forget what we're asking of them. And I appreciated being made a little bit uncomfortable in order to go a long way in my thinking. And so I really appreciate the pedagogy you all brought to your own presentations.
Well, I enjoyed all of the presentations. I have to say my best experiences came at lunch, when I had the opportunity to meet a number of colleagues that I would never have otherwise met, and to hear about what they were doing and thinking in this field. Oh, okay. And Teresa has reminded me, I'm Catherine Cox. I'm an acquisitions editor at the University of Iowa Press, and I work with Teresa on a series called Humanities and Public Life, which is all about the ways that humanities can be engaged in public activities, for example, in the healthcare field. So we are actively looking for great books about programs involving the engaged humanities, civically engaged, whatever the term is that you want to use. So you can go to the University of Iowa Press website, click on Series, and then Humanities and Public Life, and it will tell you what you need to know to propose a book to us.
Well, I also appreciated being a student again and not having to think about anything except what you all were saying. But a lot of times I'll go to a conference and my thinking will be maybe more crystallized, but I think that based on so many different ideas that you all presented, it became a little bit more diffuse and more for me to think about.
It's been a few years since I've thought about some of these things, and I just happened to see this as an email, so I said, why not? And I've been inspired by this group that comes from all sorts of different areas, and I think that there's hope for breaking down those barriers, and I think maybe there is something here to recreate the way in which medicine and health is viewed in terms of a more favorable, a more compassionate way going forward. And I think humanism and humanities helps us realize that. I wish there were more people here to take part and to benefit from what you've shared with us these last few days.
I was very upset because I teach all day Fridays, and so I missed all of yesterday. But I teach a class, a graduate class called Innovations in Pedagogy, which is telling them things we've already known for the last 2,000 years. And yesterday, the guest lecturer was the new associate provost here for community engagement. And she's an epidemiologist by training and teaches in the College of Public Health. And what I realized when she was talking to my graduate students about community engaged learning, service learning, the kinds of things, we are at a moment where we can do a lot of this stuff. There's a kind of cultural moment here where, at least at this institution, there are going to be resources available. There are going to be people who get it. And we can sell it if we do it in a canny way. And so that, we are, there's a certain utopian piece to this where, if the world were perfect and we could do medical care so physicians and nurses and physical therapists could spend as long as they needed with the patient and explore things in a way that's non-judgmental and you sing that song everybody refers to. There are ways to make some incremental steps and get them positioned solidly so they stay. So, and that was great.
Is this a subfield? Is this a discipline? Is this a method, an approach? Is it a set of values? What is it that we need to say we are bringing to the table when we apply to other individuals, other, institutional or departments? What is it that we are bringing to the table as individuals who are doing this health humanities thing? And I think it's an important thing to articulate for those who are maybe a little wary or unclear as to what it is, what is the value added of this kind of approach that we're so positive about.
I can start this off if that's okay. Did you have?
Go ahead.
Okay. I love that question because it's back to nomenclature, it's back to terms. And I think that that's something that we struggle with in this endeavor. I recently contributed to a book, and it was a book with predominantly authors and scholars in the UK, and I used discipline, and they changed it to field. And I thought, okay, that's interesting, But I almost want to say, and without diminishing the serious intellectual inquiry of our work, the important discourse that has been generated, I almost want to say it's, an inter and multidisciplinary project, primarily because I don't know if field and discipline captures the political and practical applications and considerations that we're engaged in. Discipline and field, they sound so static. They sound so passive. And I think that we're much more engaged in changing the culture.
It's a movement.
Mm-hmm. Movement is where we started back in the 60s. It was called a movement. So I'm, it's sort of, we don't need a slogan, we need a name.
Well, it's in some ways it's the same model as disability studies,
Yes.
gender and sexuality studies, age studies. Maybe we're a study.
There's an argument for that. There have been arguments made, that medical humanities should have been called medicine studies, but I think we're trying to expand the field. So perhaps it is health humanities studies. I don't know.
I was also thinking, and this is in the same vein of not wanting to sound like I'm trivializing this endeavor, because I'm not. But I think in a way, I think of it as a mode of deep play. You know, it's like play because it's experimental and because it connects to us at a very rich way. It's deep play, and also play because it's movement across boundaries. Play in the sense of freedom. So,
Yeah, I think the notion of play is really good, and my goodness, any reference to joy in the industry of academic research and teaching, sometimes you have to struggle to get a sense of joy these days. Things are proceduralized out, and metric society is here. So a big challenge here. But one thing I would say about health humanities, because it's quite fresh on the scene, and that's great. But the key thing about health humanities is it's a critical collation, a critical collation of very different but valuable ways of being and acting specific to healthcare, health and well-being. The improvements that you can have through music, through the arts, literature, and so on. This is not some magical, mysterious world. There's, research showing the impacts of these approaches, and the public themselves are demonstrating the relevance in their everyday lives. My kids are into music. My kids are into reading. My kids are into acting, dancing, choir. Both my younger ones are in the choir. So the public is demonstrating the relevance of health humanities. What hasn't happened is policymakers, policy drivers, and also academe hasn't taken seriously the opportunity of, if you like, surgery through the arts and the humanities. I know the prescription thing is a little bit controversial, a dose effect and so on, but these days we have a great opportunity for moving the arts and humanities into the clinic, into the homes of informal carers who are trapped in the boundaries of their gardens, looking after people with dementia, for example, or other long-term conditions, giving relief, practical compassion, not just in our professional areas where we do the giving, but also for the public and self-caring public.
Any responses would be welcome. Although I do know what I ask. Marcus, thanks.
Well, just to follow up on this question of disciplinarity, Snow's lecture about the two cultures has been mentioned numerous times. And Andrea brought up a point that has stuck in my head. Since you all are actors in between these two disciplinary boundaries, there's been a lot of talk about the benefit added of humanities to medicine. I wonder if you could turn the question around and talk about the benefit added of medicine to the humanities and the arts.
Yeah, I can jump in.
Yes.
That's a question that I'm really fascinated with, and just taking it from the art side, I think art can so much benefit from being on the receiving end of that dialogue as well, and in numerous ways. One way would be just thinking about pure artistic creation, and we've seen some illustrations. We talked about the Bill T. Jones work that was done, that was commissioned specifically on themes of illness. And these are works that are highly creative, that are not just illustrations, but that platform of constraint, in a sense, that happens with this dialogue provides many creative opportunities for artists. So working with that, what we could say maybe slightly more narrow focus that has the constraints generates creative sparks. And that's just one example. I think there are many other ways that the artistic process itself can be heightened.
You know, I would like to add to that, and because as someone who, looks at the arts and brings the arts to our campus, what I'm finding is how many artists have now turned to not only the experiences of illness or suffering, but have actually begun to use medical imaging in their work as a place to begin to understand who we are as human beings. New portraiture. So there's this really wonderful creative opportunity in that connection. We also see it in terms of narrative, and I know Maura can speak to this, but it's given really a kind of an energized and passionate explosion of narrative and reflection for the disciplines of English and composition.
Yeah, there's been a turn in the world of memoir studies, for example, where memoirs were sort of considered Oprah material or something. They were, looked down upon, and now that's become, following on the interest in illness narratives and so forth. Serious work is being done on memoir, and memoirs and I guess nonfiction personal stories have become really, they've grown, they've gotten better, they've gotten more interesting, and the scholarship around them has grown up too.
And I'd just like to reflect on something that's happened in my comics grad seminar. I've taught it twice in the past, and they made comics, but I didn't specify what the comics should be about. This time, because I'm teaching it as graphic medicine, I said, make it something having to do with health or illness or disability or medicine. And so the students are all doing this, and what has happened is their own engagement in both the comic they're making, but the class in general has become so much more deeply personal. And they're making connections between what they're studying in literary studies and where they are as human beings. And it's quite exciting. So I had an Iraq and Afghanistan war veteran who's preparing to teach at West Point and who was in general interested in trauma studies. But he's making a comic about his own PTSD experience, and it took him 5 weeks to get to the point of acknowledging that it was his own experience. And he's now dealing with that actively. And oh man, is that moving to see somebody own his experience and move into it.
I think a radical position on that, and it's a great question actually, is to conceive of the world without the drama of health. Health, trauma, illness. It's really the seat of literature, art. I look at literature, and most of it is about mental illness. Most of it is about what's happening to the mind in events and around events. And people refer to English literature or Ing-lit in that area, but you could actually refer to Mad-lit. It's almost all-encompassing. And health and well-being and illness is a great point of drama in human life and existence. So the art, the music and so on, are very often a capture point for that. So so there's a symbiotic relationship clearly going on between the two.
Go ahead, I'm sorry. No, I was just going to mention someone, some of you may know Richard Kogan. Richard Kogan is a Harvard-trained psychiatrist. He's a practicing psychiatrist and a Juilliard-trained pianist. And what Kogan does is he embodies that back and forth between art and medicine. And his performances are brilliant, and what they are not only, the musical compositions of great artists, but the stories of those great artists and how their illness, their disabilities, or their suffering impinged upon that music. And I watch him go back and forth, and he talks about how music and medicine, or arts and medicine, have been entwined since the beginning. So they're really inseparable.
Yeah, and actually, I wanted to even push at the idea of two cultures, because if you actually look back, you'll find that the culture of science, the culture of medicine, the culture of philosophy and literature used to be one. They grow out of each other, and they're always interpenetrating. And so the two cultures thing is a myth. It's a bill of goods we've been sold.
It's also a fascinating text to return to
Yeah.
because C.P. Snow is writing at a time in which he's making a case for the necessity of engineering, that we must not be bullied by these classics departments, by these all-powerful philosophy departments. And so even, if I'm not mistaken, it's 1959
It is.
that he delivers his lecture. And so the idea that even in the very relevant proximal past, that engineering was the bullied kid in the playground is, again, just a great reminder of the contingency of these disciplinary caricatures and archetypes, and it's a fabulous text to return to for anybody that's really interested, I think, in critical views of interdisciplinarity.
Well, if I can jump off that for one moment, I think one of the things that medicine brings to the humanities is real-world application. Right? Teaching at a small liberal arts college, I am very aware of how under fire the liberal arts are right now. Right? Because for parents, it's not clear how the liberal arts are going to get their child a job, and it serves a very instrumental purpose at the moment because we have such clear application here. It's not literature for literature's sake. Right? We can outline our goals in ways that make sense to other people, and so it helps our disciplinary footing and disciplinary field footing at a time when it's under fire.
It seems important, though, in light of that really important and, to me, compelling aspect of this work, to note that in the world of academia, at least in my culture, in the English department, the instrumentality is much it's much maligned. And in fact, it seems like a compromising of the integrity of the academic subject. So the tension, we talk about, two cultures, there's a lot of, this is a field that has to kind of shore itself up against a variety of impediments.
Absolutely.
I think, and so it's a surprising, to me, always surprising discovery that there are these pockets of suspicion within the humanities toward work that actually, and also suspicion toward the idea that art has positive effects on people. Even that idea is highly suspect in my particular department, which always gives me a kind of a chuckle.
Well, I think some of the reasons why there are difficulties here, and back to the turbulence that I spoke of, is that people privilege only one paradigm of knowledge. There are two paradigms of knowledge. One is not over the other. Science and interpretation, one's not higher than the other. I don't know where all these hierarchies come from. So in terms of, stepping forward, I think we need to go back a little bit and think about patients and the public, okay? My former father-in-law cared for his wife for 10 years with Alzheimer's. He never got out of the garden boundary except for 1 or 2 hours a week at the later stages. In that time, he actually he performed his garden, shall we say. He grew flowers and he arranged them artistically. And his artistic arrangement reached out beyond the borders of his garden to the community, and the community came and looked in, and he won 2 awards for the best horticulture in that city. On 2 occasions he won those awards. And he also pursued personal family history online on the evenings. The rest of the time he was caring for his wife. This is where health humanities should be going. This is where health humanities should be looking. It's already demonstrating its value in the public, but we need to collate and critically review and get practitioners on board with the solutions that are coming through the arts and humanities and make more of them as trading points for people who haven't heard about that approach. Maybe they could try that as well to break their social isolation. Okay? So health humanities is more important than the university. Health humanities isn't about trading between different departments. Health humanities is actually about the future of your societies and how they'll heal themselves when you haven't got all the centralised services lined up. So it's a critically important theme and thread for all of us to be considering.
And just thinking also about how a work of art has multiple interpretations and a certain degree of ambiguity which contributes to its richness, we can also think of the field, whatever field is under consideration, as having multiple facets and having the opportunity to interpret it in different ways or having different applications so that it may, and if I think of art, have possibility of being applied, but it may also have purely contemplative options too. Just the way mathematics also has a diversity of usages, and I think everyone's okay with that. And to me, that's what makes it so interesting is that variation and that multiplicity, and I think we can cultivate that.
It strikes me that there's a sign that the time is right in what I think of as a parallel movement in positive psychology. So there's the idea that I think positive psychology is turning over this notion that if we, say in the workplace, we work really hard, we're very productive, then we'll be happy. And they're coming at it as, actually, if you're really happy, then you'll be productive. Right? And so to me, that seems kind of parallel, that instead of thinking, well, we'll work really hard on the body and then maybe we'll have time for the soul, that it's flipped around, that if we take care of the soul, that can assist us in taking care of the body. And I see those as, maybe I'm just imagining, but I see those as sort of parallel movements.
So I'd like to offer a kind of, I want to contest the view that there are people in literature departments who resist talking about the instrumental value of humanities studies to students because we believe in the intrinsic value of the work of art, and it somehow sullies our study if we talk about how employable people are. The other thing is that in literature departments, we spent the last 40 years talking about various kinds of arts and their complicity and involvement in replicating structures of oppression. And so when you then turn around and say, oh, and by the way, having an English degree is going to make you a really good middle manager at Walmart. I don't want to do that. And so there's that complexity that says that if we are going to be useful for people in the economy, we better be working on fixing the economy while we're doing it. And that's going to be particularly at issue with healthcare. Okay, so that if we are not conscious of the fact that not only do we want our interventions in the pedagogy to make people better clinicians, but we also want to redefine what a clinician is, really. And they do too, I think. And the physician will be able to talk better about that. The other thing, just with the respect to what does healthcare, I have a student who I need to get with to find out where she matched, because she's a fourth-year med student. And if you go to the Examine Life conference and you're on the second floor at the hallway, there are these great, beautiful, abstract photographs of these kind of indistinct-looking blobs that are brightly colored and and just absolutely gorgeous. And there's cervical cancer cells. And there are photographs that she did during her, and she had this kind of moment of realization that they were beautiful, and that they had a kind of an intrinsic value of their own that she could bring out and display. And I think Sarah's going to be a terrific obstetrician because she can see that.
We're already headed in this direction, so I'm just going to push a little further on this critical view of the health humanities. We've talked about designing the future in a very positive sense, but perhaps a sense of the caution with which we should move forward might be worth discussing for a moment. We've talked in several of the panels about the role of the senses in the humanities, tactility and touch, the visual in particular. Both Susan and Anna Williem's talks spoke about the profound effectiveness and attractiveness of visual media. And I'm wondering then, from a critical perspective, do we run the risk of solidifying or perhaps ossifying a certain interest in health humanities around a certain sense, for instance, the visual, in the same way that some critics of medical humanities and the health humanities have drawn back from the ways in which bioethics as a discipline has come to be sort of the man behind the curtain of health humanities. So. Indeed. And so, what are the risks that we ought to sort of keep in our view as we move forward into a future where hopefully health humanities has an even bigger role?
Well, I'd say one big risk is feeling like we are certain about what we're doing and not listening to criticisms of what we're doing and other perspectives. Yeah.
I think we're pretty safe in that right now. And not to say that I feel, at various times through my career on various health professions and I felt more marginalized. I'm still marginalized. Maybe I'm just more comfortable with it, and more under siege or undervalued than I do at this point in time. I'm always, when I hear about application or I hear about instrumentalization, I always get a little scared, primarily because there's always those trends in the world in which I live, of how do you, what's the accounting, what are the measures, what are the outcomes, and those are just not appropriate or probable ways for us to evaluate what it is we do. But I like your question because one of the things that I think, and I think that we're moving past the privileging of the text with, with the people you see here, the work that many of us do with visual images, with film. And I think that there is more to be done. I think we're sort of moving out of maybe what the first phase was, which, let's face it, began with literature and medicine. It began with the disciplines of literature and medicine, if we look back at the field, and that has dominated, perhaps rightly, a lot of what we do. Most of us are from English departments, and I think we're moving out of that. We're seeing people who are actually, from performance studies, who are moving into the field from different disciplinary backgrounds. I think for our students, this is hugely important. Because one thing that I think we do bring to our students is we give them the space to either to rediscover their creativity or to have some time to enact that creativity. And that's a precious commodity in health professions education, likely as undergraduates as well. But I think I have students who do amazing, amazing artistic and creative work, in spite of the fact that they're studying for step 2. And they take great joy in what they're able to do, to use your word, Paul, and they really sort of recalibrate themselves through that work.
I think I agree. I mean, the phenomenal shift, and it is phenomenal, of health humanities, it's certainly viral internationally. The reason for that is it's expanded the view of creativity and where creativity is. So some of the earlier stuff, which is good from medical humanities, it was locked down on a number of areas, and you can see them. There's a few of them. Health humanities has actually opened that up to an expansion model, if you like, of the different creative practices out there, whether it's painting surfboards, whether it's to do with clothing, whether it's to do with the artistry of the garden, and so on. So the creative practice has been expanded through health humanities, and there's no going back. There's no going back. At one point, actually, somebody said to me, there was a lot of threat involved between medical humanities and health humanities and the naming. And people were quite sensitive because of funding track and getting the funding into their camp and their pot. We're done with that, I think. What you'll see is not the death of medical humanities, but the evolution of medical humanities into health humanities. It's got an impetus that is, importantly, outside of the academy. It's an impetus and a recognition that there's more going on in terms of creativity than is contained within the old frame. So that would be, yeah.
Well, I just wanted to say, but I was sitting here thinking, one of the things that's so cool about this panel is what different social and professional locations we come from. And the very fact that we do that means that we're always amplifying perspectives on it. And I wouldn't want to say, of course you'd think I wouldn't want to say, it's outside the academy, because it means so much to the academy to have it inside, so that the academy moves. Bruno Latour talks about it, moving from critique to concern. We need to move past critique and engage our capacity to be concerned.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I'm in agreement in the sense that this must be a dialogue. This
Absolutely.
must be a dialogical situation. Yeah. And one of the cautions we should have is oppositionalism and going for the usual binary opposites on this, You're bad, I'm good, and, I'm the most important discipline. And the other thing is, stop messing about when you're defending your ground for knowledge, okay? Stop trying to articulate the advances of, for example, qualitative research under the rubric of quantitative explanations, okay? Just stop it. Just say, that's just ridiculous to do that. Okay, and mature mixed methods is what's coming. Everybody sees it. We don't want a segregated view of knowledge. Funders will demand answers to the big questions, and the big questions will only be answered by mature mixed methods. That doesn't mean quantitative methods with a piddly bit of qualitative. And also, it doesn't necessarily mean qualitative first, because it's pretty low down, and then the big stuff after. In fact, quite a lot of research is going the other way now, where quantitative approaches are being used diagnostically, as it were, to just home in. And then they do the rich, deep research from a qualitative perspective. So things are changing on that front. Mature mixed methods will be the big advance.
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of echo back to that idea of the visual dominance. And it's a very interesting question, I think, especially in our culture that is tending towards such a kind of visual dominance. But I think that visual impact can be used also to sort of go back to other go back to the text in a way and create a bridge in that way and open up to the other senses so that it can just be a doorway into a further spectrum. And the other thing that's interesting, though, if we take art in itself, the way that art is now so completely interdisciplinary, where a visual artist might actually be doing a sound piece. So that's why I don't think there's too much danger, because you'll be looking at art and you'll probably, before you know it, be listening to sound or something else.
Well, we had Jason here yesterday, who is a novelist who created the music that goes with his novel, which I thought was really wonderful and interesting.
Yeah.
Just on that last point, I think that's really thoughtful, is who the hell cares whether an answer comes under social sciences or humanities or somewhere else? It's an answer, right? Why does the answer have to be always allocated to one pot? I mean, some of the social sciences are more humanities, or is the humanities slipping over into social sciences? Who cares? The answer's the important thing. Like which pot you're bound in is perhaps only so important from the point of view articulating your career. But answers aren't interested in being called social science answers or humanities answers or science answers. They're answers. And I think that's where we're going in the future. The funding will be on answers, not on this kind of, turf warfare across domains which are pretty kind of fluid, actually,
How can we really make the case with our colleagues that health humanities will enrich humanities research?
Well, very pragmatically, we can show them that humanities PhD candidates who work in this area get jobs. They just plain get jobs.
I agree. And the other thing that I would say is too, and on the other side of this, and I say this to students, I say this to residents, fellows, and clinicians, having both and actually gives you much more flexibility in terms of your work as a healthcare professional, so that you can do both, and they get jobs. They get academic jobs.
Yes.
So I agree with that.
And it also gives you a very pleasurable, rich life.
It does.
Which is non-trivial.
Anna's talk introduced me to this phrase, a premature closure, in the patient assessment by a health professional. And so at the risk, perhaps, of having to conclude that all closures are premature, I would like to offer this perhaps a bookending opportunity. We started off with a 1-minute soundbite, and to offer to you the opportunity to close with a 1-minute soundbite, or with any final thoughts that you may have, as a way of bringing our roundtable to a close this afternoon.
Well, I will challenge you, right, to think about fun again. Think about fun. And in the university sector, if you're not thinking about fun, think about, is that a problem? I think it is. I mean, as well as doing hard work, as well as delivering, we need joy in our work. We need joy in what we're engaged with. So my call for health humanities would be, if this is a point of joy and fun in your life, maybe it's also significant, not just for you, but for the people you're working for.
Wonderful message. Thank you, Paul, Erin, Tess, Anna, Maura, Susan. This has been such a treat the last 2 days, and for me, this panel especially. Thank you for attending today's session and the last 2 days. And please join me in thanking our keynotes again in the way we've come to expect.